Well, hello everybody, welcome to yet another video. Thank you ever so much for joining me this week. Today I've come out to an area just behind my house. It's an estuary, it's the Englishman River estuary in Parksville, and this year the wild roses have just been excellent, and I keep meaning to go out and photograph them, and finally I was kind of forced to because they're starting to end, and they only flower once in the year. And I noticed that a lot of them are finished. We've had quite warm weather and sunny weather, which really brings the roses out quickly, and they finish quite quickly as well. So I thought I'd better get out here and photograph them. And I've managed to find a couple of shrubs that still have quite a good selection of roses to photograph. Now you're probably wondering what this abomination is. This is actually the Fujifilm 500mm lens. Not ideal for close-ups, but I thought I'd give it a go. It's just a loner. I just wanted to try it out. I was hoping to photograph some wildlife, but I just haven't had time, so I decided to try and use it on some of the roses here. Gives you tons of working distance. The problem with it is that it doesn't focus that close, so I'm having to use an extension tube, and I also have a 1.4 teleconverter as well. So my working distance from my subject right now is about probably about 15 feet, which is just way too far. But it's kind of fun. I thought I'd give it a go. Really eliminates that background, which is really nice. And then I have another piece of kit that I want to show you as well that Case sent to me to try out. And I'm quite excited to try that out as well. So let me take this photograph, and then we'll start looking for some other compositions. It suddenly got quite warm. Even with subjects like this, I find that I have to take my time to look for compositions. There looks like an abundance of subject matter, and there is, but trying to find something that's cohesive and that's pleasing to my eye does take some time. One of the things that I do look for are distractions in the frame. As an example, you know, there's lots of great looking flowers on this shrub, but there's also a lot of dead twigs. There's a lot of confusion on here as well. So trying to find the simplicity out of the chaos is not as easy as you would think it would be. Just because they're pretty flowers doesn't make it an awesome photograph. You still have to find some kind of composition. So what I generally try to look for are flowers that are perhaps on the fringes or on the edges, that are overhanging, so that you're able to try to get behind them and have a slightly different background than, say, if you were just shooting straight into the shrub. Also, light is important, as with all photography. As you can see, all of a sudden the sun has come out, and that creates this really harsh light that's a little bit hard to deal with, especially when you're backed off quite far. So right now what I'm using is the 1:200, and I've put on the smallest of the extension tubes, which happens to be 18mm, and then I have the 1.4 teleconverter behind that. So that gives me lots of working distance, but at the same time I'm still close enough that I can still control the light ever so slightly. With this scene right here, I found 3 or 4 roses that are clumped together, and they're somewhat isolated on their own. The biggest problem is that they're on a twig that's overhanging, so with the breeze that we have, they're moving around quite a bit. So what I might do is I'll cheat a bit. I'll just find a stick or something and lean it up against the stem out of the frame to try and mitigate some of that movement. And I do that quite often. Like if you have a flower that's moving in the wind like this, you can sometimes get a forked twig or something and just kind of hook it at the bottom to try and stop that wind from moving the flower. I seem to be dealing with challenging conditions today. 1 minute it's raining, then it's sunny, and then it's windy, and then it's calm. It's the usual thing, you know, you get set up, you see a composition, you get all set up, and then all of a sudden the wind kicks off and everything's blowing a hoolie, and it takes ages to get a sharp image. Anyway, so I've talked a little bit in the past about using this system as a, you know, for close-ups, and I don't own the macro lens for the GFX system. I've never used it. I'm sure it's a great lens. I think it's 110 or 120 millimeters. The thing is that I like a bit of a working distance with for my subjects, and I've said this before, but the reason being is that it enables you to move around without interfering with the subject, and it also gives you some control over what's happening in the background. If you're too close, then you don't have a lot of room to move around. Now, with the 1:200, I can use the extension tubes and also the 1.4 teleconverter. That also works with the extension tubes. The 500 is just, you know, it's like I said, you can't focus that close with it, so it's not going to really work for this type of photography. That's why I usually end up using the Nikon system with the 70-200, or even better, if you have a 105 macro lens or the old 200 millimeter macro lens, then they work amazingly well. Now, Case recently sent me this filter, and this is actually a close-up lens that screws on the front of your existing lens. Now, this particular one is 77 millimeters, so if you have something wider than 77 millimeters, it's not going to work. But if you have something smaller or 77 millimeters, then you can use a step down ring, which is what they supply you with this thing. I think there's a 67 and a 62, but don't quote me on that. The problem with a lot of these lenses is that they're not good quality. I know that Nikon made some for a while, which were really good quality, and I think Canon made them as well. A couple of years ago, I did a video where I bought some cheap ones off Amazon. They were absolutely useless. They weren't sharp at all. I don't know why I even bothered. This though, now I haven't used it yet, but it seems that it's really good quality, and we'll soon find out, I guess, by using it. The nice thing about using diopters like this in a pinch is that when you use them, you don't lose any light. So if you put on an extension tube or a teleconverter, then you start to lose light. So that's one issue you might face, especially when using smaller ISOs like ISO 50 or 100 or whatever. With a diopter like this, you don't lose any light. They work extremely well with zoom lenses. The one issue that you might have with them is that it doesn't give you a lot of leeway when it comes to focusing on your subject. Usually you'll have to zoom in and out a little bit, as well as use your focus ring to get your subject in focus. But if you just do the odd close-up, then something like this might be a really great alternative. As an example, right now I'm using the 1:200 on these two flowers here, and at this distance with this lens, I can't focus that close. But as soon as I put this on, then it enables me to get in much closer. It seems to fit pretty good, and this is a really nice working distance for this flower anyway. I can get in closer. Like right now I'm about, I don't know, half a meter. Let's see how close I can get before I lose focus. Probably not that close. Let's see. Yeah, I see. I can't focus there. I can focus there. And then if I zoom all the way to 200, I can't focus. I have to back up a little bit. So as I said, they're not that intuitive to use, but in a pinch they work really well, especially if they're good quality ones. So let's take this photograph, if I can get this back on my tripod, and we'll have a look at the quality of this close-up lens. Something else I forgot to mention, when I'm working in lights like this, there's actually some really nice little backlit on that right now. But usually when I'm working in lights like this, I'll work in the shade and then try to bounce light back into the subject. So I do have my little scrim here. You can use a flash, whatever you happen to have in your bag. I don't carry this around with me that often, but obviously I knew I was going to photograph flowers today, so I brought it with me. So I'm going to just pump in just a little bit of light just to warm it up and also give the flowers just a bit of life. All right, I've come back to the house and I'm having a few problems actually finding things to photograph. I mean, there's lots to photograph, but nothing really flowering that's quite small. I mean, I have this rhododendron here, but I certainly don't need a close-up filter for that. Luckily, my partner Karen recently planted a plant that's flowering right now that has small flowers on it, so we'll see what we can do with that. Before I head on over there, I just wanted to mention that probably one of the biggest advantages to using something like this is that it's not brand specific. So you can use it on any camera. So I'll take some shots with the Hasselblad, but I'll also take some shots with my old Nikon D700. And so you can have a look at the results from that. I also wanted to try and show you kind of the advantages and disadvantages to using longer focal lengths with a filter like this as opposed to, say, shorter focal lengths like the 55. So let's go and check this plant out and see what kind of images we can get. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So obviously with this lens, which is relatively wide on a medium format camera, you can see that the working distance, here's my subject here to here, is not that great. And the other thing is that even with the close-up filter on, focusing, especially with just a fixed focal length, can be a bit of a problem. Like, it would be really handy if you had a focusing rail, and what that is a rail that your camera fits on, and you can turn the knobs on, geared knobs, so that your camera can go back and forth on your tripod head. The problem with that is, it's just more stuff to carry. And ideally you want to carry less stuff, unless you're just going out to do macro photography in your garden like this situation. Now, I don't have a focusing rail anymore, I got rid of it years ago. But the thing is that the working distance for focus with this lens is pretty shallow. You don't have a lot of room to focus, so you kind of have to move back and forth until you get it right. And then of course with the fixed focal length, you only have that one option. You can't zoom in and out and focus at the same time. The subject is very small in the frame. I guess the one advantage with this camera, which is 110 2 megapixel or whatever it is that you could crop it if you wanted to. The other thing is that, you know, as soon as you start using a wider angle of view, then of course you're including more in the background as well. And you know, sometimes that might be what you want. Like if you're photographing, say, a pattern in some bark or a rock pattern or something where you want everything sharp and the working distance doesn't really matter that much, then something like this might be perfect. But in this case, because I'm photographing these little flowers, I really want to separate them from the background. So the best way to do that, as I said in my last video about photographing wildflowers, is to back up with a slightly longer focal length so that you can have a narrower angle of view and really pick and choose those backgrounds. Okay, I was wrong about one thing. So I have it out at 120, which is actually giving me the size of the subject that I want in the frame, so it's larger in the frame. But the working distance for that size of subject is about the same, if not less, than the wider focal length. So in an ideal world, I mean, the 120 works in a pinch, but ideally I'd like something a bit longer so I can back off so that I'm about out here so I can move around easier. Where I am now, there isn't a lot of room to move around, but this is working not too bad. So in a pinch it works. But I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the GFX and put the 1 to 200 on and see what the working distance is with that. I suspect it won't be much different. Probably the best lens for this subject with this camera or the D850 would be the 70 to 200. Right, so what's my conclusion about the case close-up lens? Well, I mean, my use with it is pretty limited. I've only just done a couple of days with it, but it seems pretty sharp. And for a diopter, that's a good thing. The ones that I bought off Amazon were really cheap and they weren't very good at all. So basically I just wasted my money. The old filters that I had from Nikon, they seemed really good at the time. And I suspect the Canon ones as well, although I've never used those. And I don't even know if those companies sell them anymore. The quality of this seems really good. It's kind of like the filters. The filters are excellent quality, and this seems like equal quality. As far as price goes, well, it's cheaper than buying a full-on macro lens, that's for sure. And in some cases, it might be cheaper than some of the extension tubes, especially if you buy the name brand ones, like this one's a Fuji one, a Nikon and Canon. Their extension tubes tend to be quite expensive. Obviously, you can get no-name brand ones that are quite a bit cheaper. It's really up to you what you decide to buy. I'll definitely leave this in my camera bag for the odd time when I do close-ups. Same with the extension tubes. If I was going to do a lot of macro or close-ups, then I would probably invest in a macro lens, either a 50mm or a 100mm or even longer. I don't know if some some of these manufacturers still produce 180s or 200s, I'm not sure. But that's what I would go for if I was photographing close-ups a lot. Anyway, I hope this was somewhat helpful. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And also let me know what you use for macro photography. Do you have a macro lens, or do you just use your normal zoom lenses? Yeah, so thank you ever so much. Be sure to give me the old thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And as always, if you'd like to support my channel, why not head on over to my website, where I have a number of products available right now, books and some of my quiet light hats. I just got a new batch of those in. It all helps keep this channel running. All right, till next time, bye-bye.